All right, folks, the Bro Pod is back. Dylan Bowman, Aaron Lutzy, Second Nature, Midsummer here. And yeah, we're excited and we got a lot to talk about here today. Although, we do have sort of a loose docket here. Lutzy, how you doing?
Good. Isn't it kind of funny that we're in the middle of the summer, which should be actually the busiest time for people that run and ride bikes, yet somehow both you and I have enough time to add a second podcast into the week.
Everybody's on vacation right now, you and me included, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I'm not mad about it. Honestly, it's been a pretty magical summer. We've been doing this thing where we just try to get our kids outside as much as humanly possible, and it's sort of working. I was talking to you this morning about how I got them into mountain biking, and it actually took, which as a parent, getting your kids to share in the thing that you love is next to impossible, doubly so when it requires physical exertion. So
Yeah. Maybe it's fun to start with a dad corner here because my son is turning 3 in just a couple of weeks. And it's such a fun time for those who are parents. They will obviously know. For those who are, wrestling with infants, trust me, this, it gets better. 3-year-olds are so fun and entertaining. And for those who are debating whether or not to have kids, man, we are in what feels like a golden moment. And my son was on the road with us for the last month, obviously. So we basically drag him around when we are working our faces off at these big trail running events. And it obviously rubs off on him. He does the most hilarious stuff. He knows dad is like on TV and talking on the microphones and stuff. So when we go out for our little family walks here, Rhodes will say to me, "Hey, dad, I'll run, you talk on the microphone." And so he runs down the little trail here in our neighborhood and I pretend to be like, a TV broadcaster calling the action for my son. So anyway, really
that
fun
is
dad corner here to get us started on the bro pod.
we were in Bend this last week and someone recognized me in the parking lot of Mount Bachelor's bike park, which I mean makes sense, right? Like mountain bike content creator at a mountain bike park, like the probably the place you would get recognized. But getting recognized in front of my kids is like the best feeling ever because I'm validated by somebody that they don't know. And I believe that Rhodes is kind of growing up with this always being the case. I think for my kids, like I wasn't this cool the entire time, so the fact that I've somehow become cool is an interesting thing. But
Come on, you've always been incredibly cool, Lucy.
not to them.
Not to the kiddos, yeah. Well, hey, we got some fun things to talk about, but quick thing here, keeping it intentionally vague. Man, that podcast that we did about China, people really responded to it.
Yeah, maybe
And
they wanted to hear the bro pod, man. We haven't chatted just the two of us on the pod for a while. Maybe it was just the return to form that people were pumped on.
it was like a really thought provoking conversation, too. I listened back to it and I was like, there's definitely a lot to kind of think about here, and there will be for probably years to come. So I'm sure we'll revisit the subject in future episodes. But the cool thing that happened afterwards, as you know, Lutzi, keeping it intentionally vague, I might be going to China this fall, with some very capable tour guides here, some people who listened to the show said, "Hey, well, we thought it would be interesting if maybe you joined us on our next trip to China." So
I think that's very interesting, not only because I know all the details, but also because it's just like it did for me. I feel like it's going to open your eyes in a pretty meaningful way. And I think, the conversation that you and I had, like there's a ton of nuance to this whole thing, but there's never a bad time to just like get in there, experience, see it for yourself, take what I said with a grain of salt and then form your own opinions. Getting there and putting your feet on the ground in China is going to be quite the experience. And I think maybe a quick chat before you go, I'll get you all dialed in with all the stuff you need to know because there's a short list of things you got to do. You got to secure your VPN. You got to get your Alipay and your WeChat set up. Like you got to do some things. You can't just like drop in like you would in Europe. But it's going to be an eye-opening experience for you, and especially with that crew you're going with. I think a really good one.
yeah, it's funny too. I'm just remembering that tomorrow we're talking to Kylus, a brand we've talked about on the show, which is effectively oversimplifying it, but kind of like the Patagonia or the North Face of China. We're talking to them tomorrow for potential free trail stuff. So anyway, interesting. Yeah, just like kind of meta conversation that I'm sure we'll pepper into, future episodes also. I've got three things to touch on here in today's episode that are all media related. Lucy, did you bring anything you want to talk about too?
Yeah, I have one that's also media related, which I think you're going to find extremely
All
interesting.
right, so this is the media pod. I'll get us started with my first one, then we'll pass it off to you for yours, and then we'll see how much time we have left. But I had a little bit of an epiphany while we were at the Hard Rock 100, and I thought it would be fun to just introduce a topic here about moving the goalposts and stepping back and appreciating where we are when we're building our businesses. Because I had a just funny moment after Hard Rock when I was kind of looking back at the film that we made about my 2021 race there. It was called Peak Life Experience. It was really our first major foray into documentary filmmaking. And when I say we, I mean my partner Ryan Thrower. I ran the race, he made the film. But this was the very early days of Free Trail. I had just put my notice in at my previous job and had been training my face off through the summer in Mammoth Lakes, California to get ready for the 2021 Hard Rock 100.
Shred
The
Monk, right?
Shred Monk, yeah. Ended up having one of the best races of my career. I finished second behind Francois Den that year. Spoiler alert for those who want to go check out the film. But um, anyway, then after the fact, we realized, well, we captured a bunch of this. This is probably going to be a cool film. And took our time sort of putting it together, or Ryan did, I should say. And we ended up releasing it in, I think it was June or July of 2022. So roughly a year after the event itself. The thing that was funny as I went back and revisited the film, I just went back and watched like the clip that we made to post on social. And I remembered that when watching the clip, that we had a sponsor on this film, Aaron. And I'm not going to name the brand here, but people can go watch the film and they'll know who it is. But this is, I think, it was just fun to look back at where Free Trail was 3 years ago, using Peak Life Experience as the filter. So that brand, we negotiated hard for them to pay us $3,000 for the film and had a handshake deal on it. And then after the fact, it hadn't gone through official channels. And so after the film had been published with their brand on it, with me using the product throughout the race, there was at least some pushback about like, hey, this wasn't fully approved and whatever. And we were like, eye roll, you've got to be kidding me. Obviously a big learning experience for us in terms of making sure we had all of our ducks in a row. But I just thought it was hilarious because, the film probably took Ryan 100 hours to edit, if not more. You would know better than me. The race took me 22 hours to run, plus, obviously hundreds of hours, thousands of hours in training and a whole career leading up to it. And the value that was placed on it was $3,000, of which I don't even know if we ever collected it.
Oh man.
But anyway, I just thought it was important to add this because like I get so caught up in my bullshit every day of like my business is going to fail. Every piece of adversity feels overwhelming. Where are we going? Are we making any progress? And then I remember back, of course, a project like that for us would come at a much higher price tag at this point in 2025. So I just thought, okay, in 3 short years, we went from being this fledgling media company that was like begging for $3,000 paychecks so that we could lose tons of money on a film project to now, having being a lot more established and being sought after by brands who, are happy to pay us market rate or at least a fair wage to do the work that we do. So this is my pep talk to everybody who's in the trenches right now, feeling like they're not making any progress. It's hard to pick your head up sometimes and see how far you've come. And for us, this was like the perfect little thing at Hard Rock to be like, wow, we actually have come a long way in 3 years to have, this particular story then snowball into where we are now with Free Trail. Comments from you, Lucy, on moving the goalposts?
I love this. I think, I actually read this newsletter this morning from Billy Oppenheimer, which shout out to Christian Rawls for turning me on to Billy Oppenheimer's newsletter. He talked about something this week that was all about sort of the gifts that you give to your future self. And so when you think about it in that context, where, yeah, you've fought hard to get that $3,000 paycheck, but like if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't be where you are today. If you hadn't put that out, if you hadn't really taken this like media trail running media thing seriously at that stage and continue to take it seriously and to continue to like take one step after another, you wouldn't be in the situation you're at. And so this idea of thinking about what are the things that you are doing for your future self plays such an important role in the decisions that we make, because so much of I think what we go through on a regular basis is so immediate. Like what's my immediate return on my investment here? And when I was actually talking to someone about this morning, where it's like a YouTube video that I put out a year and a half ago is having a moment right now, and as a result, the monetization is coming in at like a really great level. It's actually like I'm getting more money right now from YouTube than I am from all of my sponsors combined, which is kind of crazy. And it's not from something that I just put out. It's something that I put out a year ago. So past Aaron delivered something that's like making a big difference right now. And so in the same way, like you made that decision to accept $3,000 or even not even get paid for it, but you fought hard to put something in the sand and then you continue to build on top of it. Had you not done that, would Free Trail be where it is today? It's fun to like go back and be like, what were the inflection points? And I think that film was one of them.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's still probably the best film project we've ever produced. And certainly I know something that Ryan's really proud of is being kind of his origin story as a filmmaker, and his first try ended up being at least something that I look back on and am incredibly proud of. Obviously it was, as I said, one of the races of my career, but it really was the start of us feeling like, oh, Free Trail can be much more than just a podcast. So for those who are listening, and if you haven't seen it, a little preemptive BPC here, go check out Peak Life Experience on the Free Trail YouTube channel.
Something else that we've talked about on this pod multiple times in the past is that idea of people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 5. And one of the things that I always recommend is that 5-year journal, right? Where
Right.
it's like each page has 5 entries in it, and then you just keep filling the journal out every year. And then you go back up a couple and you see how far you've come in 1, 2, 3 years. I'm on year 4 of my 5-year journal, and this particular journal is like completely dedicated to my YouTube channel. But it's crazy when you go back a couple years and you're like, whoa, crazy. I was so pumped that I was getting 500 views on the first day of the video. And now, if that happened, I'd be distraught.
So fun and interesting to talk about. And I'm sure all the founders in the audience can resonate, and hopefully this gives them a glimmer of hope, or at least some inspiration to maybe look back at where they were 3 to 5 years ago and admire how far they've come. What's your contribution here that's media related, Lucy?
I've got a new one. Last thing I'll say is that the uncertainty of this whole thing is actually like part of it. It's a feature, not a bug. I think it's like something that gives us and makes us feel uneasy, but it's actually like I feel like if you weren't uncertain about your future during this building process, something would probably be wrong, actually. So I've had to kind of let go of that as well. Like, and I think I'm supposed to feel this way. I think this is actually more normal than not. Okay, so here's what I got. There's a new YouTube channel that just launched, and I want to share with you a little bit more detail on it because I think it's kind of interesting, and I think we might see this pop up in a few other sports. Again, going back to my cross pollination idea, you could probably steal this idea for basically any other sport. In mountain biking, there is a brand new YouTube channel called Quarter HP. Quarter HP is like, I guess, the horsepower you put out on a bicycle, right? By watts. Essentially, it's 4 people. One of them, the main host of the channel, actually used to be the technical editor and podcast host at Pink Bike, which is like the biggest mountain bike news channel. And this guy Henry is now launching this project Quarter HP, and it's all about frame only testing bikes. So what they did, they went out and got all the other parts sponsored so that on every bike they test, it's going to have the same tires, going to have the same drivetrain, all that kind of stuff, so that it all kind of is equal, but then they'll test the frames specifically on all this stuff. So they went out and raised money for the project by getting sponsored in all these sort of other parts, so that they didn't have to get a frame sponsor, so that they could go and do this big review channel for mountain bikes, which I find to be really interesting. Number one, because if they did it the right way and they were just doing affiliate deals for frames specifically, they'd probably be able to make enough money to fund the channel just like that. But number two, kind of interesting that they're supplementing the actual channel through those other partnerships. So they have like a tire sponsor and some other stuff like that. So they just launched. I'll be really interested to see kind of how it goes, but the production quality is super high. The only thing, and this is just me because I'm a mountain bike YouTuber, but Henry, the guy who is the host, famously called out mountain bike YouTubers in a podcast on Pink Bike about a year and a half ago, making fun of them. And now he is one. So I guess all I have to say is life comes at you pretty fast.
So explain the business model difference to me here again.
So the business model is they've got all these sponsors except for a bike sponsor, so
Okay.
that they can do extremely credible and detailed bike reviews, but of just the frame part of the bike, not the rest of the bike. A lot of people will do all the different parts of the bike, the suspension, the brakes, the drivetrain, the handlebars, whatever. They are just focused in on arguably the most important part of the bike, the frame of the bike. And so they can give you these sort of like unbiased reviews because the money that they're getting
Is from
isn't
the
from
supplementary components.
right. And then they'll probably make some money on the affiliate side of things. If people go out and buy those frames, they'll probably make money on the YouTube views. But yeah, I don't know if it's going to work actually, but it'll be interesting to see um, what comes of it. But so far, so good. They've got 2 videos out, and I'm just going to be watching this one to see what happens.
You know, I wasn't planning to go here, but this might be fun to workshop together here on the pod, Lucy. With Free Trail, the biggest, I would say, obvious opportunity for us to expand our content offering is gear related content. If we think about our various media franchises, obviously we've got the Always On Free Trail podcast. We do Rest Day, which is sort of like our news oriented show where we kind of talk about what's happening in the sport at large. We have Trailgating, which is sort of our event coverage property where we go to races like Western States, Hard Rock, UTMB, and kind of bring college game day energy to trail running. And I really want to get into gear related trail running content. And I'm actually very interested in potentially pursuing, because there really doesn't exist the de facto online store to be able to buy things that are trail running related. And how might we, as Free Trail, take, so deliver a good product to an audience? There's people are always hungry to learn more about the gear and the brands in a space, and then give them an opportunity to buy those products, maybe even directly from us, if not, on a Shopify based web store that would allow brands to drop ship from people who ordered through us. So to the Second Nature community, if you've got e-commerce expertise, maybe drop your boy a DM in the Second Nature Slack. Aaron, I don't know if you want to respond to this little mini galaxy brain here.
There is a feature within Shopify, provided that the other retailers also use Shopify. There's this thing called the unlimited cart where you can connect a bunch of shops all together. That might be something interesting worth exploring. I think actually the most important piece of the entire thing is finding that person who would be doing the actual technical review. So most magazines and most media outlets, people that do this as part of their offering, have a technical editor. In fact, the Quarter HP guy, that's exactly what he did for Pink Bike. He was the guy that was like digging through the patents from all the brands. He was the guy that was looking at all the details and all the like super, super nerdy stuff that then would turn into like accessible content that people could really get the most out of. I think there's a really interesting story to be told, and I think that what would be really interesting would be not only the ability of free trail, because like you need to be first, best, or different. There are review sites out there, or review channels and stuff, but like what would make it different is what if you leaned into like what makes free trail special, and specifically trailgating. What if you're at UTMB and you're at the start line and you're just getting a review from someone, or you're at a rest? I mean, I'm just throwing stuff out, but like you're at one of the aid stations and somebody just broke apart and they're talking about like what went wrong or whatever. I don't know. I feel like the fact that you are physically in the same location as people using specific products, you could have a window into how that product is working in like the most extreme environment. And that might be the thing that you could add into all the technical and the new release data and stuff. Because in so many cases, the people want to like put the shoe out and then they've got their talking points and they send it to their people. I mean, there's like a pretty well-worn process here, but like, could you actually deliver something of like, we're going to do the shoe review, but it's going to come out after everybody else does theirs because we're going to see it in action first, capture that, and then talk about it. I don't know. I wonder if there's something more free traily that you could do than just like have a technical editor.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think it also brings up the question that you and I debate all the time about diversifying free trail beyond just me, right? And I mean, we all both know that it'd be very hard for me to carve out the time to actually start doing shoe reviews myself.
Yeah, there's no chance, dude. There's no
so,
way.
so I don't know. Maybe we need to put out a job description and hire a technical editor, and then we can workshop how we make it first, best, or different.
I mean, that's a really cool way to think about growing free trail, of bringing in more people, giving them opportunities to continue building in directions that A, you have no time, but B, you know, like, yeah, there's just like, here's a thing that bolts on to like what you're already doing, and you could start to figure out not just how they would do their own thing under the free trail banner, but how they might tap into what free trail already has.
Yeah,
Could be really cool.
could be very cool. All right. Well, to be continued on that one.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Are we ready to move on here?
Yes, please. What do you
Okay.
got?
Do you know who Joe Budden is?
The rapper?
Yes.
I mean, yep, yep.
Is that the extent of your knowledge?
Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, so we're on the same page here. I had basically the same surface level consciousness of who he was based on, my at least loose following of hip hop culture, which is not a lot, but knowing that Joe Budden existed as a rapper and that in sort of this second phase of his career, he had built a very popular podcast. Did you read the New York Times article on Joe Budden's podcast last week?
I didn't read it, but you told me just like really quickly about it. But
It's
fill me in.
unbelievable. Okay, so this has nothing to do with the outdoor industry, but we're going to bring it back and apply it to the outdoor industry as we dive into this a little bit more. But the TLDR here, Lucy, is Joe Budden apparently on his Instagram stories posted a screen cap of their Patreon with the important revenue figures scratched out. So theoretically, his followers wouldn't be able to see. And of course, that's not how the internet works. People can always reverse engineer or do some sort of investigation. And it turned out, it sort of became viral online that he was basically making $1 million a month off of his Patreon only on his podcast. So the New York Times article was basically written to do sort of a deep dive on the business of Joe Budden's podcast. High level, $20 million in revenue, Lucy. Of that 20 million, if you had to guess, what percentage do you think comes from Patreon?
Half?
12 million, over half. What is that? 60%.
Wow.
So they supplement that with brand partnerships, of course. And his manager in the article says that they limit it to 3 partners at a time. This is something that I just am so attracted to. Fewer partners, higher dollar figures, and then have the bulk of the revenue come from subscription. We have not been able to do that with Free Trail. It's very hard to come up with a product that the trail runners are willing to pay for. But I really, after reading this, was like so inspired to push on subscription as being a lever to build community, number one, but also de-risk the business. In the case that there is an advertising slowdown, if you don't have a subscription business, you can go bankrupt very, very quickly. And as media people, you and I, Aaron, we know that you're so reliant on the generosity of brands. And if the brands aren't doing well, it basically nukes the media industry in a community like mountain biking or trail running. Of course, trail running has been on this interstellar growth trajectory for such a long time. I have always been paranoid, and I'm sure our audience is just getting very sick of me always being the paranoid guy on the podcast here. But I always just get nervous of like whenever this slowdown happens, like whenever the growth of trail running begins to calm down a little bit, what is going to be the impact to free trail and how do I protect against that starting now? And it's by doing the Joe Budden, in some way coming up with a subscription product that people are willing to pay for. And I don't know. I think this is, I have a couple other things here that I think are interesting to toss into the conversation, but pausing there real quick and just the mix of advertising, subscription, building community. This is sort of in your wheelhouse. Get us started on Joe Budden.
Should we start a Patreon for Second Nature?
I mean, it's not a bad idea. And you and I talk about this quite often about, our show is probably not the best fit for most advertisers, but subscription. By definition, subscription's probably our best option as a media company, because basically those are the 2 ways people monetize with media.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I've always said in that conversation is that we're already doing so much. I don't want to have to do more to be able to earn a little bit more. Like I don't want to have to put out another podcast episode every single week to be able to, then get Patreon stuff. Like, how do we make it interesting for people to support us? I think a lot of people went to Substack for exactly that reason. Like, actually, a lot of people left Patreon to go to Substack specifically because the monetization and the growth there was a little bit easier. Whereas Patreon is like all these individual verticals. There's a little bit more crossover happening on Substack. So I think those 2 channels are really similar. I'd be really interested to see, which one people prefer, or if people even want to support the channel. I don't know. Like, it's a really interesting question. Also interesting to me that, Joe Budden has both the Patreon and the advertising, and not one or the other. Like, do they put out a lot more extra content on their Patreon because of that? It does look like, I'm just going through their Patreon right now. It does seem like they have quite a few extra Patreon exclusives where they talk a little bit longer, or they have kind of a raw and uncut thing. They also have a couple extra shows on there too. So I wonder if, because like it's a network. It's not just that one show. There's like multiple shows. So
yeah. With our subscription, I've always like tried to make it something different, and now I'm just coming around to the idea of no, you just have to put content behind a paywall. I mean, that's my lesson from Joe Budden. From the New York Times article, it says that they do 2 free podcast episodes a week. And I have to say, I've never listened to the Joe Budden podcast, so I don't know how accurate this stuff is, but you trust the New York Times. And then they put up a lot of stuff behind the paywall on Patreon. And so it introduces the conundrum to me of like, well, man, maybe we should be taking the Rest Day podcast, for example, which again is sort of our newsy focus show where we talk about, hey, here's what happened in Western states. Here's the latest FKT that got broken. here's, the athletes who are super fit, and maybe make that our member only exclusive podcast, and then develop a cadence where we're really consistent with it. And then maybe, because I mean, to me, it's more so than the prospect of earning more money, right? Because if we took that and put it behind a paywall, it would reduce the number of impressions for our advertisers. But what it would do is encourage people to subscribe to Free Trail, which would give us resiliency so that when the market eventually slows down, when trail running grows at a less aggressive pace, notice how I didn't say if there, we will have a better chance of surviving any sort of advertising recession, because when I look at our revenue mix now, we are fairly diversified. But if brands all of a sudden stop spending, we'd be in a really, really tough place as a business. So I don't know. I just think this Joe Budden pod was really interesting, or this article was really interesting about his podcast. And the other thing that's going to lead me to my third media point here is about like the value of podcast networks. Mm-hmm. So I think Joe Budden had an exclusive deal with Spotify that he left on like less than friendly terms. And he now has his own, I think, network. So he has diversified the talent that sits underneath I don't know if it's called the Joe Budden Podcast Network, but let's just operate with that as the name now, which this has become, I don't know, something that we see across a lot of different categories. In politics, you'll see a lot of different similar shows sort of rolled up under a single network. In sports, you see this often too. And just to make it explicitly clear for the audience here, the value in doing that is to aggregate a total number of listeners so that a podcast network can centralize the advertising sales to brands. And so you can better monetize the total audience in aggregate rather than each audience of each show. And it reminds me of the podcast episode we did. It was probably our episode number 2, where we talked about Rich Roll and voicing change, and how maybe this is a model that could be applied to outdoor, of aggregating a bunch of podcasts like mine, maybe like Paula and Eric's show in triathlon, like Payson's show in mountain biking, and in some way aggregating these different, though similar, probably in demographic and psychographic, people in the audience, and maybe be able to aggregate or be able to sell better advertising deals based on that. Comments on the network thing before I give you a specific example here?
That'd actually be a really great network where you'd have all these outdoor sports sort of put together under one banner, and then you'd reach out beyond the industry to sort of diversify more than anything. Like Payson had this one, I think it was called Dometic. He had like a ice pack sponsor for a while there, and I was like, oh, that's such a good get, because you're not relying on the ups and downs of the cycling industry to get supported here. And yeah, I think the what was it called? Like some sort of advertising collective. There was a name for this for a while, where lots of people were trying to basically spin these up, where it was just like, how do I collect a lot of different angles to build up to this certain number, and then I could sell that number to the advertisers. And actually, like, it's a pretty effective way of reaching your core demographic, the people that you're trying to reach out to. I think when it works, it's pretty clever, and it's pretty targeted, and offers the opportunity to reach out to these people in a pretty meaningful way. Again, just like your technical editor, who's the right person to be, dialing for dollars, basically.
Yeah. I think you made the comment when we talked about this on the phone that Jonathan Levitt's doing something similar in the running space, doing some deals with a bunch of different running podcasts. And again, the hope is that all of those listeners in aggregate could help Jonathan close a deal with like a bigger non-endemic partner that has much larger advertising budgets, which leads me to want to talk about what would you say of the podcast you listen to? Is there a specific podcast network that comes to mind?
I guess Doesn't HubSpot have one? It's like My First Million
Yeah,
and all
yeah.
those.
Yeah, that's a good example. I was thinking Vox
Right.
Media,
Yeah.
with like Scott Galloway, Kara Swisher, Pivot. I'm sure they've got a bunch of other shows, but I just hear Vox Media Podcast Network a lot, and I'm sure that they have been, really successful. I know for a fact that Vox is really investing in this and sees this as a big part of their future. Anyway, I listened to a specific show in the Vox Media Podcast Network that's sort of like trade media related. It's called Channels. It's hosted by Peter Kafka, who's a longtime technology and media podcast, and he's a good reporter in the space. And I would be shocked if my podcast isn't significantly larger than this podcast, just by virtue of the nature of the subject matter and his show being, very trade focused. Anyway, recent episodes, he's had advertisers like Shopify, Monday.com, which is a big B2B enterprise SaaS company, Salesforce, same thing, Venmo, Mint Mobile. So I don't know. I just think this is interesting. It's like, okay, show in all likelihood smaller than mine, maybe even smaller than Second Nature by listenership, yet with massive name brand, huge $1 billion publicly traded technology companies as advertisers. My point is that's the power of a podcast network or of an aggregated audience, to
Yeah.
where Vox has so many shows in their portfolio that this one, that's in all likelihood probably pretty small, has advertisers that you and I have both heard of and probably generates a lot of revenue based on the fact that it exists underneath this umbrella network. So we have two examples here. Joe Budden, didn't pursue being in a podcast network, and then ultimately, by virtue of his success, created his own. And then Vox, on the other hand. And so as I look at the future of Free Trail, it's like, would we be better off underneath, a larger media network that where people could basically just take our impressions and put it towards a larger listenership that might allow Salesforce to advertise with us? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just immediately go to like, oh, what would that open up? Like, ooh, there's the salary for your technical editor right there, or yeah, people ask all the time about monetizing Second Nature too. Like that, I don't think anybody would really be that upset if we had a Venmo ad or whatever. I don't know. It would be nice to have a return after all this stuff that was gone in. But, the other side of it is the indirect opportunities that continue to fall into our lap, like your trip to China later this year. Like podcasting has sort of been worth it no matter what. But it would be nice to like support all the people that help us out, because it's not just you and I talking to the microphone and that's it. Like there's a lot of extra stuff that goes down behind the scenes that people maybe don't see, and it would be nice to take care of those people. So yeah, I don't know. Interesting one. Like, there's a lot of different ways to do it. I guess I'm always so wrapped up in this idea of bringing all the value back to the audience, which I think is the right thing. But also, thinking about some of the previous podcasts, like that conversation I had with Amy Engerbritsen not too long ago was, about like, hey, there's stuff about my job I don't love. And sometimes I take a deal with somebody to, subsidize everything else I'm trying to do. And so, would anybody blame us if we subsidize what we were doing? I doubt it.
Yeah, I doubt it also. And also, I mean, I'd have to go back and listen to these ads again, but like, for example, Salesforce is probably not like throwing discount codes in those ads, right? Like it's more about impressions of getting the brand out there. And I'm sure you can make the argument that the audience for that show is more valuable than Free Trail, which is a very specialized consumer facing trail running media. So like what value would Salesforce have in putting their stuff there, where, I'm sure Peter can say, hey, I've got all the ad executives and all the, big wigs from all these various technology and media companies. So even though it's a smaller audience, it's a more valuable one. But going back to the old episode with Jonathan Levitt, which is always referenced of performance versus brand marketing, wouldn't it be great to in some way get, I don't know, you're always trying to pursue brands that, yeah, aren't necessarily coming to you to get the incremental sale on their next product, but instead who want to support the work that you're doing and attach their brand name to it in a way that will give them a halo effect that over the long term will create a more healthy business with increased revenue, but not in the immediate short term, here's a discount code, use it at this URL type way.
Yeah, what did Jonathan said? There's sort of the three buckets, right? Awareness, consideration, and conversion. And so we want to be on the awareness and consideration side of that. When you get into the conversion, it gets pretty tricky. And I mean, there's science and math behind people. They need to see a message 12 times before they click through and follow through. And so, what are the chances that you're going to be the 12th one? Automatically, you're in a pretty tight spot. So, if we could be partnered with somebody to raise awareness or help them consider that, that would be great. That'd be a great partner to have. And I think like what we've done with Free Trail and Super Rider has been very much in line with that. I just actually started working with Insta360, and I think so many people are still like learning about what camera should I use. And actually, it's kind of funny because if you think about like all these mountain bike content creators, the one thing that we are pro at more than anything else is camera editing, storytelling. And so if you're going to listen to us on what parts to get or what thing to use, probably camera is number one because we've been doing it just as long, if not longer, than we've been mountain biking. But the Insta360 thing, I just started kind of working with, and yeah, I don't know. I feel like that one is not so much about conversion as much as it is just showing people, hey, this is what this is and how it works. And side note, this might actually be really good for trail running too. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think there's some really interesting opportunities out there.
Interesting. Okay, one last thing for me. Did you see Substack's recent fundraising?
I saw that it happened. I saw that they're sort of doubling down on creator support. Tell me more.
So, also media related here, and I feel like it fits elegantly with everything we've talked about so far. Substack raised somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million at a valuation of about $1 billion. From what I understand, they have about 40 million in revenue, so it's like a ridiculously high revenue multiple and a very aggressive valuation. The round was led by the Churning Group, who we've talked about on the podcast a couple of times. But really the biggest, most salient thing here, which connects to our last conversation, is that it seems very clear that Substack is now considering advertising as being a important way for them to capture value in the future of their business and justify this valuation. Of course, for those who have followed Substack's journey, and I'm so impressed with what they've built, there is sort of a certain magic to the platform. And even for somebody like me who doesn't publish there, but who reads there often, it's just a really interesting new media platform that does have some kind of a network effect, even if you're not really creating on it. But since the earliest days, they have been religiously anti-advertising, pro subscription. And now it feels like they're coming around to the potentially sad reality that in media you almost certainly have to get into advertising eventually. So it'll be an interesting saga to continue to follow here to see if Substack can ever grow into this amazing valuation. I think there's no question the product is great. It fills an important hole. It gives so many people a platform and a voice. But from the X's and O's of business, it's still very much TBD. And from a lot of the commentary analysis that I've listened to about this new fundraising, criticism about their execution, about the leadership team, are they on their way out? Things like that. I want to give them immense credit for what they've built. But I personally am very interested to see the future of Substack here. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in our audience here who are using the tool and who might be able to take advantage of whatever advertising tools are coming down the pipeline here.
I have two thoughts on this. Number one, I think that probably what Substack is identifying is that people are getting fatigued having to pay all these individual monthly subscription fees for all the different places, because everybody who's contributing legit content on there also wants to be paid for their work, as they should. But also, do you really want to have 30 different subscriptions for $5 a month every month? Like, that starts to add up fast. And so I
And
think,
also, do you really want to be getting 10 newsletters a day or
yeah,
more?
yeah,
Like the
only
inbox
second nature.
becomes, yeah, the inbox becomes a little crowded. So that's where I think, they're probably going to be leaning into it being more of a platform,
Yeah,
like really leaning into their app. And then, yeah, hopefully there is opportunity for people like you and I to support creators with our dollars in a way that does have sort of like a network, right? It was going back to the podcast network conversation where, say you kick down $10 a month and it goes towards 3 different subscriptions or something like that.
yeah. This is actually just a nice little tie back to that discussion, because if you want to talk about YouTube, YouTube is probably one of the largest advertiser networks on the planet, right? And all I have to do is make really good content, and all of a sudden, almost by magic, ads are inserted before, during, and after my videos. I know what I need to do to optimize for that, and a paycheck comes every month from Google for whatever amount of views and watch time I got. And so I don't have to think about any of that. I just focus on making really good content and making better content so that I can monetize even better. Why would it be any different at Substack if they put ads in there? All I have to worry about is making really good content, and the results will come from there. That seems great. And just like my YouTube channel, I have a memberships option there. If you want to pay a couple dollars a month to get some exclusive content or to support the channel, you absolutely can. But it is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of my total subscriber number. And it doesn't, it's not the most meaningful input on a monthly basis. I appreciate it, but it's not crazy. And I think that Substack could mimic that entire thing, because what happens, you get that network effect of like people realizing like, oh, I can make money on here just by like making good content. I'm going to go do exactly that, and somehow, YouTube and Google in the background have made it so easy for people to make ads to go on all the videos and pay whatever CPM it is, and their algorithm targets the right people so that it's effective, et cetera, et cetera. Like, why couldn't Substack do the exact same thing? You've already got the membership thing in place, but now add in the way where, you meet certain criteria. On YouTube, you have to have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of total watch time in the last year. If you meet that criteria, you start getting checks, even if they're, not gigantic. And then over time, that just continues to grow. We have something called catalog value, where your videos are always continuing to grow and earn money. And so there's no reason why Substack couldn't do the exact same thing. They just kind of built it in reverse. They did membership first. They could add in this network of advertisers, and actually, like, yeah, I mean, it would make it easier for the writers to actually get paid.
That's exactly where I was going to go with this. Is I think Substack's going to basically try and compete with YouTube because, yeah, I mean, everything you just said is totally true. And Substack is clearly trying to diversify away from simply newsletters. And as I've heard, the podcasting tools are super easy. I think you can start doing live streaming stuff now too. So you can imagine in the not too distant future where creators who are going to do a live stream on Substack, there'll be a 10-second pre-roll ad for AG1 or something like that, right? And then, I don't know, there seems like have a much better opportunity to develop a closer relationship with the creator and still give them some of that. It takes no effort from you to sell this ad. We're going to do that effort for you. In exchange, we're going to take, a significant percentage of whatever revenue we generate through the ad, but you're not going to have to worry about it. And I think it'll probably make the Substack experience a little bit less enjoyable for the users and the readers, but will make things a lot better for the creators and make it so that they probably do have a little bit more viable option. And it actually reminds me, I don't know if you have anything you want to respond to there, but I may have one more like little galaxy brain before we get to BPC.
Really quickly, I would just say if you don't like the ads, then you do YouTube Premium, where you pay
Right.
$10 a month or
Subscribe to the
whatever.
show.
Right.
Yep.
And you pay the premium so that you get all access on Substack, and then it just goes away, and then you're good to go. I mean, it's obviously developed to a point where it works great for YouTube and for all the creators. And also, if you could get that right, and this is it, because I think a lot of platforms have tried to get it right and haven't. But if you can get it right, the amount of people who will then come flooding in to try to, side hustle their way into success. I mean, you're going to get more people coming into Substack to create more content, which then continues to build the network effect, continues to build a flywheel, and continues to bring both eyeballs and content creators for the advertisers to work with.
Yeah. Okay. So, final thing here. I was listening to something about media recently that made the argument that really the most famous people in the world are the streamers, people like Speed and
Kai Cenat.
Kai Cenat. People I've literally never seen anything these individuals have ever done. So to hear them characterized as the most famous people in the world certainly makes me feel like I'm a boomer. But that being said, I do think that streaming is an underutilized tool in sport. And I know you have experience doing it with Super Rider. And you could imagine a future, maybe even potentially using a tool like Substack, where big name trail runners are, hey, I'm going to do a 6x3 minute hill repeat workout at my local training hill, come follow along and watch. And especially if you're doing it through Substack, you can imagine a world where those athletes, again, going back to the original galaxy brain of the OnlyFans for outdoor, right? You could imagine people like myself who would pay a premium to see that type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that makes it tricky for us being outdoor athletes is that sometimes we go to places that don't have any service whatsoever. We're not in an air-conditioned, house in front of a bunch of computer screens doing stuff. We're actually out there getting dirty. So, that's the tricky part. But they do have some there's like a backpack that you can wear that live streams with you and stuff. And I've definitely thought about this a fair bit because, I used to do live streaming for Super Rider inside the warehouse. And actually, it was a really important phase for my channel because I actually had a chance to connect directly and immediately with my audience and listen to the questions that they had that they wanted to have answered through my content. So it was this really interesting feedback loop where not only was I doing something of value to them, but I was actually getting a ton of value from those conversations and from those insights. And so it ended up being something that was really valuable on my journey to really trying to figure out what I offer up and how I offer it up. Probably one of the major inflection points. And the bottom line is it wasn't really that successful. I think, probably the maximum amount of people I ever had on a live stream at one time was 20, 40 people maybe. But I learned a ton from it and it was an extremely important part. So I would redo it again. I'd love to figure out a way to do it because I love the idea of putting on live streams. It's a different skill set for sure, but it's cool if it works. And if we could get more people in sport to do it, I think you're right. It could be really interesting. Red Bull has probably made it the farthest on this when they live stream races and stuff like that. Like Red Bull Hardline just happened this past weekend in Wales, one of the gnarliest events that Red Bull puts on outside of Rampage. And they did do the live stream of the race itself, but single athletes doing it is still pretty rare.
Yeah, man. Now that we're talking about it, I feel like Substack is in a good position to compete both with Twitch and YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that's gotta happen to get there, but
yeah, which may allow them to eventually grow into this $1 billion valuation. But congrats to them for closing that new round of funding. And yeah, certainly rooting for Substack personally as somebody who just really enjoys interfacing with a lot of the creators on the platform. I know you got to run, Lucy, so let's go to BPC. You get us started.
Yeah. I mean, last thing I'll say is like, what a great time for everybody, both creators and audience, to be here, because I just feel like the incentives for making better and better content are showing up left, right, and center, which makes it great for the people that are creating the content, but also for people that are looking for great content. They're also, the people that are making it for them are being supported appropriately and getting opportunities. And I don't know, I just feel like it's a really good time for everybody. The worst thing that happens is that you got to sit through the 15-second ad to have your people be supported, I think is not the worst thing in the world. And I remember listening to this podcast, which it's escaping me right now, but it was like, you wouldn't think twice about tipping somebody a couple dollars after they pour you a coffee for 30 seconds. But like the idea of, supporting somebody who just spent 2 hours recording a podcast and editing it and putting it up is just like, no way, it's interesting. Okay.
That's
Uh,
why that's why going back to Joe Budden, eventually you got to start putting content behind a paywall, because then people start to miss it and they think, well, maybe this I won't miss the whatever $50 a year, $100 a year for this person who I listen to hundreds of hours of their content every year or something. You
I
know,
would I want to just invite the Second Nature audience to just tell us what to do in the discussion tab of our Slack channel. I don't know.
love it.
Everyone has asked me, and you, I'm sure, like, are you guys going to monetize? What are you going to do? Should we run ads? Should we open Patreon? Should we open the membership thing on Substack? Do we need to make
If
more
so,
content?
what would you want as part of the membership?
Yeah, just tell us what to do, please. I don't know. I'm lost. But also, yeah, I want everybody to be stoked, and I want to do something that's valuable to people. And I think that's where I'm like really hung up, is like, what can I do that's more valuable than what we're already doing? Okay. BPC. So I got a shout out Kitworks. I actually got a chance to ride with Greg the other day, ride mountain bikes. And if you haven't seen what Kitworks is, basically it's like gear organization to the absolute max. So prior to meeting Greg, I just used to like throw my helmet and gloves and pads on like the passenger seat in my car and then drive away from the mountain bike trail. And then I'd get home and I'd have like an armful of stuff that I would just like dump into my garage, and then I'd drag my bike in. Basically, Kitworks is like just so dialed in. It's these carrying cases, so of different sizes, right? Like little ones that you can put tools in, big carrying cases. There's like a duffel. There's all kinds of different products, but they're all based off sort of like this cube system. And if you know anything about photography, a lot of photographers have something called a photographer's block, and so they open their backpack and there's all these little areas where they can put cameras, they can put lenses, they can put all this stuff, and it just organizes it, because most backpacks and bags, everything just like dumps down to one side whenever you put it on your back or whatever. And so the kit work stuff is basically like a photographer's kit where you've got the cubes where you put it in all the different things. And Greg hooked me up with one recently, and like my organization and my overall quality of life basically skyrocketed instantly. And I got to see the inside of his truck and his kit, and it's like on a whole different level. So we're gonna have him on the pod pretty soon here, but I'm so fired up about what he's doing, and where they're headed with everything. And I just want to learn more about, how he got to where he is. I have so many questions for that podcast, but if you haven't seen the Kitwork stuff yet, you got to check it out.
I'm looking at the website right now, mykitworks.com. Looks like really cool product.
It's, even if you're not a mountain biker, like literally everything. Like
I
this
mean, just the
is,
duffel bag. I mean, that looks like something I could bring to Europe with me this summer.
yeah.
Sweet. Great one. All right. Mine will be real quick and easy. Killian Jornet ran the Western States 100 after 14 years after winning the race in 2011. I think he's 37, 38 years old. He's got 3 kids now. Still finished third place, ran 15:19, an insanely fast time, and just proving that he is the best of all time and still remarkably competing at the top of the sport after so many years. They put up a cool sort of like race retrospective video on his YouTube channel called 15 Years Stronger, The Return to Western States. I'm pretty sure it was done by our buddy Nick Danielson from Seattle, who does a lot of work with Killian's brand Normal. So if that's true, shout out to Nick. He's a really, really amazing photographer, videographer, creative in the sport. But I just wanted to flag that for the audience. People have probably seen it already, but 15 Years Stronger from Killian Jornet. Kudos to him on another amazing Western States. And it may be announced by the time this podcast comes out, but there's rumors that Killian's coming back to the US this summer to do some big personal project. TBD as to what that's going to be, but we hope Killian comes back to the US this summer.
Cool. All right. Stay tuned, I guess.
Stay tuned. All right, Lucy, bro pods are so back, buddy. Great to catch up with you. I know you got to run, so
Yeah. No, this was good. I think the future is bright for so much stuff, and I'm so interested just to hear the feedback that we get from this one. I'm always interested to hear the feedback, but this one I feel like we've both personally been sort of wrestling with this for the last year and change, and I'd be really interested to hear what everyone else's opinion is on this whole thing.
yeah, it's funny. A media focused episode where the conclusion is, we're still not quite sure what we should do, but please jump in Slack and coach us up to
Tell
the
us what to do.
second naturalist community. All right, great chat, buddy. Well, can't wait to do it again soon. For Aaron Lutzi, I'm Debo. See you next time.